So we're back with the Bryan Danielson and AEW run, and today we're on match number 38, which is Bryan Danielson versus Lionheart, Chris Jericho at AEW All Out 2022. Now, this has obviously been built in our previous matches, obviously stemming from the stuff with Anarchy in the arena, then through the stuff with Danny Garcia, and then obviously the previous match with Jake Hager. This match is... It's a very weird match. I'll say why. I'll say why in a minute. Obviously, you know, the whole thing is Bryan during this period was very much like demanding that, you know, Chris Jericho become a true self, as true old version, the Lionheart version of Chris Jericho, which was a big deal. And to be, you know, the best wrestler in the world. And obviously Jericho was like, you're going to get the Lionheart. And he does. The thing is with this match, it shows Jericho's age. And that's its problem. I feel like this match is very much a Bryan carry job. And bear in mind, biggest Bryan fan fucking I know. You know what I mean? But point is, like, you know, huge Bryan fan. And I love a Bryan carry job. I think Bryan's the best ever. I just feel like this one, it's so much to ask for. And it's kind of hard because... So the problem is with this match is they're trying to make it more of a technical wrestling match, which obviously to represent how Bryan is and obviously Jericho, Lionheart version of him. And I feel like it does kind of achieve that, but it's not due to Jericho, it's due to Bryan. Because Bryan's controlling the pace and they're controlling what type of match it was, and that Jericho's trying to frustrate Bryan at the start so he can control the pace. Bryan's obviously seeing right through it. And Jericho does fine. He gets knackered. Like, the match is like a 25-minute match. And it's like, Jericho just can't do those. Not at this point, and definitely not now, Jesus. But, like, you know what I mean? That's the problem with this match. It's not adjusted for itself for Jericho now. And I do feel like it is Jericho at this point. It's very much it's a case of, does Jericho have it in him? And they're trying to go from the story that he does, but he doesn't to me. Obviously he's still the heel, and obviously Bryan's the face, but they still have some, you know, cheers for Jericho in there because it is Chris Jericho. I feel like it's problems. So, like, again, start of the match, Bryan's obviously very much the more technical wrestler, and Jericho's trying to get in there, he's smacking him, you know, and Jericho gets some moments. He does like these lion salts and goes for the, you know, for the walls. The lion salt, he does spam the lion salts here, and the lion tame is obviously a big move in it. I'll explain because that's a good point for me. But with the lion salt, it doesn't look as athletic as it should, and this is the problem with it. So, like, Chris Jericho is God. I don't know. I think Chris Jericho's, I forget how old he is, but you know, there's no problem with Asian wrestlers. You know, look at Sting, brilliant older wrestler, and like stuff like that. But the Jericho's problem is in this match, and obviously it's kind of a good encapsulation of what's the problem with Jericho in general. Is Jericho can't really, especially here, can't really grasp that he needs to change his style, and he's trying to throw for a throwback to be the Lionheart at this point. And obviously, you know, it's a big ask and it's a big deal, and it is cool. It comes out to the Lionheart theme, that's pretty cool. Obviously he's got the gear, that's pretty cool. And I just feel, for me, like Jericho couldn't, it's a tall order for that long of a match and that long of a time. It's too long of a call for me. I think you could have done that with Jericho. I don't think it was possible with that time. I do feel like they do try and have Bryan just dominate the match, but then he kind of... So this is the thing, right? So Bryan has obviously a lot of the, you know, the control or the, you know, the dominance in the match, for instance. But what I think Bryan does is they try to show it a bit even, but Bryan obviously sells it well. So, like, Bryan gets... So Jericho puts Bryan in the Lion Tamer, which is a big move, and even Regal's on commentary. And he's doing Lion Tamer, and then Bryan's, like, trying to get, you know, to the ropes, gets the ropes. And, you know, it's like they're trying to show us, like, whenever Bryan gets in a hold by Jericho, it's very close. And I just don't like that. I don't think that's the right way to present it, personally. But, again, bias. As he continues, so after that, like, Bryan hits a beautiful Psycho knee, as you expect. Jericho sells everything. He gets a lot of chops to the chest, which look pretty decent. There's a point where Bryan's obviously got Jericho on the ropes, and he's just beating the fuck out of him, you know, punching him, kicking him. And then Aubrey grabs him off, and he goes, Bryan obviously hits the, I have until 5. And, like, there's points where, like, Jericho's trying to throw Bryan off the ropes, and, like, he's, you know, shaking his head no. Obviously, he goes for a diving headbutt, which, you know, and then Jericho dodges it. Like, there's a lot of stuff like that where I just feel like Jericho, if they were going to go for the whole aspect of, Bryan's going to beat Jericho up, but Jericho just gets, a scrappy win, just for, pure luck and, stuff like that. I feel like they shouldn't have presented those moments as like that. I feel like they're trying to have the cake and eat it too for me. Where, in the sense of, they're trying to present Jericho getting dominated, but then also presenting Jericho as in it, like, not fully out of the match, which is just something I don't think is, possible with this type of Chris Jericho. But also, I think it's just a hard ask in any wrestling match. It's like that old CM Punk like Shield match clip where he's talking about where they go, you gotta make Roman look strong when Punk's gonna be 3v1, you know what I mean? Like that, it's that type of shit where it's like, you're trying to have both, and it just doesn't work for me. I feel like the match from Bryan's point of view is good. Like, again, he does a lot of good holds. He gets a good, like, again, the kicks, obviously, he's really gonna fuck that up. He gets a lot of, he gets some beautiful arm bars. He gets, a crossface, shit like that. Basic Bryan shit. He does obviously scream, he's gonna get his fucking head kicked in, which is great. And I do feel like there's a small moment where it really encapsulates the match for me. So early on in the match, like, Jericho goes for the lion salt, misses it a tiny bit, or like it's the walls, like, trying to transition, he gets to the walls, and it's a slow walls transition, and Bryan kicks out of that. And then, but there's no real adjustment, they don't really play into that, it was close, and even the commentary is like, you can tell they're trying to, like, blag it. But then there's a point where Jericho goes for a move on Bryan. And I forget what it is. I think it was just a basic... I think it was one of Jericho's holds on... I think it was a Bryan hold on Jericho. And it was, like, kind of... Not sloppily, but, kind of hastily broken. And then Bryan, like, kind of, plays it off as a bit staggered. And it's shit like that. And that's what I feel like was definitely... Just the difference between the two of them. Where, like, Jericho will not really acknowledge that something looks a bit weaker than it should. And, like, he needed a bit of an adjustment, but Bryan would, and it kind of sells it a bit more. It kind of, gets it involved. Bryan obviously has this, Bryan's got this, cocky arrogance in him. He's going, like, this is when he starts kicking him and beating him in the chest. So he goes, come on, Chris, you said you want to be a wrestler. Come on, Chris. Stuff like that. Really trying to entice Jericho, because, Bryan knows Jericho can't beat him, that shit. And then it eventually does break down into not a bit of nonsense, but the finish, I don't like the finish. But there's a point where, so they go into the ropes, and, like, the non-stop, and then, like, Aubrey's breaking it up, and then Aubrey gets in there, and then Jericho runs to Aubrey, like, and then Bryan's trying to run and hit Jericho, and then Aubrey's in the corner, like, whoa, and stuff, don't hit him straight away, but then Jericho goes for a roll-up pin, which, bullshit, and then Bryan kicks out of it, and then it eventually goes a few more, a few little, I think it was an arm drag, line, basic shit. That's the thing. It doesn't have no, like, imaginative, like, oh my god, look at that. There's nothing that, and it's not really possible, due to Bryan's opponent not being that physically able to do that. But what I do like, what they do is, well, what I don't like. Sorry, let me get over this with the finish of the match itself. I just don't like. I think it's cheap. I think it's they're trying to make it the point, but it's also a stupid point to make. So what they do is, they're about to do an arm run. I think Bryan's about to do another psycho knee on Jericho, and then Jericho gets in the gets Aubrey in the way. Aubrey gets in the way, and then Bryan's like, "Whoa, I don't want to hit you." And then Jericho hits the low blow, then hits. I don't know if it's just he hits a straight lariat or what. The point is, he gets the pin just from a low blow, and it's like, what? And then Jericho's off. It shows Danny Garcia in the back shaking his head because he didn't want Jericho to win by cheat, and he really didn't want that. And then, obviously, the rest of Jericho Appreciation Society come out. They're celebrating with Jericho. Jericho's absolutely fucking knackered at this point. And I just feel like... I think my problems with this match is it tries to present itself as something that it isn't. I feel like you could have definitely had Jericho as this type of... this match. And I feel like you could have had Jericho pretend that he wants to be a wrestler and then realize that he couldn't be a wrestler. He has to go to more sports entertainment, hits the low blow, gets the win, and then, Bryan be livid after. But they don't show Bryan after it, which I think was definitely a poor call. I think you should have had Bryan in there, livid of all hell, calling Jericho also. Jericho was after it, going, I'm the best in the world! All that stuff like that. I feel like the match was way too long. For Jericho at this point, that's way too fucking long. I mean... all respect to Chris Jericho at this point, it just doesn't work for me. It is impossible to have someone like this. Bryan, again, best wrestler in the world, ever, in my opinion. And I just feel like at this point in time, Bryan could do a lot, and Bryan can do a hell of a lot. We know all that. But, like, there's only so much you can give a guy to do with someone who's trying to look not dominated, You know, like, they're trying to make Jericho look into it. Like, you can't present it like that to me. You can't present Jericho in this as a guy who's not fully out the fight. But then it just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't, like, connect. It just doesn't work. I just feel like that's its problem. I feel like you could have had this be a quick match and then, like, an anticlimactic finish with, like, the low blow. That would have worked if it was short, and you could have had Bryan fume and obviously build their feud a bit more. But then also you could have had this be, like, just a domination from Bryan. Or you could have Bryan, like, do, like, sort of a thing where Jericho hits him early on and then that kind of hinders Bryan's ability. They don't really do that. I think Jericho hits him with... Oh, what's it? I don't know if it was, like, it was a lower back move. It was something really heavy at the start. I forget what it was. But the point is, it's like... there's a rolling elbow. Bryan does a beautiful rolling elbow to Jericho at one point. And obviously Jericho does a spinning back elbow, the Judas effect, which was cool. But, like, that's the thing. It's just... It's too slow for Bryan to really let loose, and I feel like that's its problem as well. It's the pace doesn't really help Bryan at all. Bryan can work with it, but it doesn't make it a classic. It very much is one of those matches on those pay-per-views where you're like, okay, this is just to kind of keep the crowd, you know, let the crowd, like, die down a bit, but also build it back up. It's kind of one of those matches. It had that vibe, obviously, of All Out. I think this is Brawl Out as well. I do feel like, for me, I think this match, I forget where I saw this, but Jericho, someone said, if this match was like 10 years ago, it would have worked. And it's like, yeah, I kind of agree. Like, I think the Lionheart thing is a good idea, but it didn't work out in terms of giving Jericho that persona and trying to present him like that again, because, not that he couldn't, he just couldn't do it with Bryan, and it was a poor attempt for me. And they try and blend it, obviously, but it's just like, there's no, in what world is Lionheart at this era, which he's barely Lionheart, better than Bryan? It's never going to work. But then also Bryan himself does his part well, obviously. He sells the pain Jericho puts him in. I was worried that Jericho was going to make him pass out like Garcia did. That was really going to worry me. But I do feel, not on Bryan's part, it's just Bryan can only do so much here. And, like, Bryan can do a lot, like I say, but you can't really get Chris Jericho in a 20-minute plus match at this point in time to feel athletic. And that's what it's trying to be. It's trying to be athletic, technical wrestling match. And it does that. If you give this to a few other wrestlers than Bryan Danielson for Jericho, it works. It does work. I'll stand by that. But against Bryan, where he's just going to be outshone by a technical wrestling, that's kind of the point of, you want to go up against the best and then, you know, stuff like that. But it's just very misconstrued. It could have been constructed a much better way. It's a fine match. It's not an incredible. It's fine. It's kind of subpar, if I'm honest. But it's one of those matches. Did I enjoy it? Kinda. Did I think it was insane? No, obviously not. Did I think it was bad? No, I don't think it was a bad match. I just think it was very weird. Not underwhelming, because I don't know what. It's just it's one of the weirder matches we've really covered for Bryan, especially. It's a very weird match, but it's one in the run. That's for sure. And yeah, Jericho getting 20-minute matches back then, Jesus, 4 years ago now, it wasn't good then, Jesus, it ain't right now. So looks how time has changed. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Bryan Danielson versus the Lionheart version of Chris Jericho at AEW All Out 2022. Let me know what you thought of the match if you remember it. Let me know what you think of, obviously, this version of Jericho. And overall, what's your, opinions on both wrestlers, but specifically Jericho as Lionheart. That's something I'm really interested in.